Well, welcome everyone to session one or seminar one. This is called Sustainability from Grape to Glass. And before I introduce our wonderful speaker, just a couple of housekeeping items for you. If you could, similar to our opening session, make sure your video and your mic are turned off so we can have the best quality presentation. And then if you could hold your questions for our speaker until the end of the presentation, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And the subject matter that we're going to go through is really timely. How do we define sustainable agriculture? How do we define sustainable winemaking? Our speaker, Lisa Francioni-Hai, who's the director for the California Sustainable Winegrowing Alliance, which is a nonprofit that was formed in 2003, a joint venture between the Wine Institute and the California Association of Winegrowers, was developed to promote environmental stewardship and social responsibility in the state's wine community. And Lisa's been an integral part of implementing the California Sustainable Winegrowing Program, which has been a voluntary educational program for California wineries and vineyards since February of 2005. So they've been doing this for quite a chunk of time. And she oversees the third-party certification program called Certified California Sustainable Winegrowing. She's served as the project manager on numerous federal and state grant projects and has assisted with the implementation of over a dozen grant projects during her 15 years with the California Sustainable Winegrowers Alliance. So Lisa is really a bridge builder, and she's helped to build partnerships and collaborations with all key stakeholders in the wine industry in California, from wine growers, wineries, to trade associations, agricultural professionals. And she leads the development of educational workshops, events, and works closely with expert partners to develop these tools and educational resources, including an online self-assessment and reporting system that she's going to go through with us this morning. So very grateful to have Lisa here, and she's going to start this conversation now. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Lisa. Welcome.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much for inviting me here to talk with you all. I really, as Lisa mentioned, I've had the great pleasure of working on the California wine industry's sustainability initiatives for many years now. I think it's close to 17 years. And I've just, stuck around because it's truly been an honor to work with so many great wine growers and vintners and others really committed to sustainability and really trying to create the most sustainable operations they can and sustainable industry they can. So I'm really happy to be able to share what we've been doing in California with you all, and also just where you can also borrow some of our resources and tools, and talk a little bit more about just kind of the framework around sustainability. So I am going to talk about the California's initiative. I'll talk a little bit about what do we mean by sustainable wine growing, what is the definition, talk about the different benefits to adopting sustainable practices, which is key to why would you do it. And then I'll also go through some marketplace interests. So, people always have the question of why does it matter? Who cares about sustainability? And we've been able to do some really great trade and consumer research to shed some light on that beyond just anecdotal, which we've heard for many years now. I'll talk a little bit about the importance of actually communicating your sustainability. And then finally, just share a few more tools and resources that can really get you to the next step. So California sustainability initiatives really began more than 20 years ago, if you look at some of the regional programs. But when you talk about the statewide program, which I have been involved with, it began with this alliance between, as Lisa mentioned, Wine Institute, which is a trade association for California wineries, and the California Association of Winegrape Growers, which is the largest trade association for growers in the state. And together, there was a lot of really great regional educational sustainability programs taking place, but they wanted to bring that education to all California growers and vintners. And there also wasn't much happening on the winery side. And so we really created the winery educational tools. Since then, there are other winery programs, but together they formed the California Sustainable Winegrowing Alliance. And we are a nonprofit organization that is made up of half growers, half vintners, which is really just a key element of our program. And I think also why the program has been so successful for so many years. And that's because it is this true partnership between growers and vintners, making sure that everything we do benefits both groups, and recognizing how important they both are, of course, to our industry. And so the very first tool that we have is our California Code of Sustainable Winegrowing, which I'll talk a little bit about, where the first edition was released in 2002 after an 18-year development. It was created by our Sustainable Winegrowing Joint Committee, which is a committee of about 50 growers and vintners that represent all different size operations from all over California, which is a really, again, key part of our program to make sure that everybody is really represented, really at the table as we talk about what is sustainability for a California vineyard or winery. And we are now actually on our 4th edition, which was just released this year, recognizing that this is a living document. Sustainability practices are always changing and new best management practices are being introduced. And so it is a living document that we are constantly evolving. The code has 15 chapters. It has 140 vineyard best management practices and 104 winery practices. You can see these are the chapter titles. So, I think the key with sustainability is it really is covering a very broad range of topics, everything from what you would imagine a sustainability program would include, such as, soil health and water management, pest management, but in other things as well, including, solid waste and human resources and your neighbors and community. And so it really is a very comprehensive self-assessment tool that we've created, and covers a lot of different practices. The workbook is available online, and you can go to our website if you would like to download a copy of it and take a closer look. But this is just one of those practices. One of the key reasons I wanted to show it is so that both you can see what the self-assessment tool actually means for a grower and vintner that actually sits down and looks at their operation through this lens of the self-assessment, but also to show that it's an educational tool as well. And so this is, one of our 140 vineyard practices, where category 1 is kind of considered the most basic practice. If we have regulation in our state, which we have lots of regulation in California, it meets regulation. And then as you move up to a 2, 3, or 4, you're increasing in your sustainability. So in this example, and it's kind of the shortest one from the workbook, which is why I include it here, but we're talking about monitoring for insects and pests. Category 1, you're rarely monitoring. 2, you're periodically monitoring. As you move up higher, you're monitoring weekly, and you're also keeping a written record. And then category 4, you're not only monitoring weekly, keeping a record, but you're actually using that information to guide your management decisions. So you can see, again, it's this scale, and all of the different practices across all the chapters have this similar scale. So it's really useful for, a grower or vintner who's sitting down, really looking at their operation, figuring out where do I fit within these 4 categories. And they could see that, if I'm a category 2 today, and, I'm periodically monitoring, it just gives you ideas of maybe I should be monitoring a little bit more frequently, or maybe I should be keeping a written record of that. And, again, this is a pretty simple topic, because pest monitoring is such a key part of integrated pest management. But as you get into some of the other areas, like environmentally preferred purchasing and just other topics that aren't top of mind, it can be really useful to see, what is the next step? What would be another practice that I could consider implementing? Another key feature of our sustainable wine growing program is our cycle of continuous improvement. And really what this just means is that you're never done. Sustainability is a continuum, and there's always room for improvement. So we encourage our growers and vintners participating in our program to actually self-assess. So sit down we have hard copies of our workbook, and we also have an online system for the same thing, to actually interpret their performance, develop action plans for areas where they might want to improve, or like I said, as they get ideas, as they go through the self-assessment of things they might want to try. The idea is that they actually implement those change and then reassess their practices. So it is a cycle that they're continuing. And it's something that we've encouraged since the very beginning. We host a lot of educational workshops. So a lot of what I do is actually travel around California, meeting with growers and vintners in all different regions, sharing the workbook, leading people through the self-assessment, answering questions, et cetera. Doing a lot of targeted education events about these different sustainability topics. But we encourage people to do this cycle to reassess. And then we also have a certification program where anyone who is certified is actually doing this cycle every year. So every year they're identifying new ways to make improvements and making those improvements. This is just a little snapshot of our timeline of our program. As I mentioned, it began in 2002. We started in 2004 actually releasing sustainability reports, which is a way for us to be very transparent about the adoption of sustainable practices within our industry. And we do that every 5 years. We're just working now on our 2020 report to release in the next couple weeks. And like I mentioned, I should add, I just realized I didn't add the 4th edition code workbook, but we also have a certification program. And as you can see, we're just as a program ourselves constantly looking at how can we improve and really what can we do to assist growers and vintners, encourage them to adopt more sustainable practices. The other thing we started doing in 2017 is reporting on our certification program. So again, it reports on the number of growers and vintners certified and the adoption of specific practices as well. Our certification program is growing. It was launched in 2010. And as you can see from these numbers, we have about 30% of all the California acreage is now certified through our program. It's an annual certification program with stringent requirements. And then for the wineries, about 80% of all California wine is actually produced in a certified winery. As I mentioned, we do have other programs within California, some regional programs in Napa and Lodi and the Central Coast. And there's another 15% of California acreage certified to those programs. So it's about 50% of California's acreage that is certified to some sustainability program in our state. We also introduced the certification logo on the bottle. And it basically, if you see this logo, which you can now start to see, it's only been a few years, but it's on almost 10 million cases of wine now, which is really exciting for us. It just means that the wine was actually made in a certified sustainable winery and with 85% of more grapes from certified sustainable vineyards using our statewide program, Lodi Rules, or the SIP certified program, which all have very similar requirements. So that's where we've been in California, but really let's kind of step back on what do we even mean when we're talking about sustainable wine growing. And, I think the very first thing to think about is just, again, how comprehensive sustainable wine growing really is, but also how complex it is, which makes it both difficult to talk about and really difficult to wrap your head around what it means for your individual operation. But again, you can see these are all the chapters that I talked about within the code. But the key with sustainable wine growing, I think, is really for individual growers and vintners to understand what it means for your particular operation, because practices really do vary by your local conditions, by your region, by how large your operation is, or how small it is. And so it's really important to recognize that sustainability is really place-based. It's really based on what's going on in your own operation. And I think that's where the self-assessment tool is really valuable, because it really allows growers and vintners to understand what sustainability means for their individual operation. And, not necessarily comparing themselves to others that have much different, operational considerations. So, of course, everyone by now has heard about what, sustainability in general, that it really is this idea of trying to balance environmentally sound practices, economically feasible practices, and very importantly, the socially equitable piece and the people. So we talk about sustainable wine growing as really trying to balance all three of these areas in every decision, big and small, that's made in a vineyard or a winery. And you can see we also talk down below about, being a sustainable wine grower means that, of course, you're producing high quality grapes and wine while you're also protecting the environment, while you're being a good neighbor and a good employer, and while you're maintaining a thriving long-term business. And really understanding, again, that the economics piece is also crucial within sustainability, that you have to have, a thriving, viable business for any of this to matter. So it's really those three things: environment, economics, and the people. People always ask, how does sustainable relate to organic and biodynamic? And I'm excited to listen into the talk after this about biodynamic. But, the way we really describe it is that, again, sustainable wine growing is very comprehensive. organic and biodynamic go much deeper into certain areas. So while we also within sustainability talk about soil health practices, cover crops, compost, while we of course all talk about integrated pest management, they just go much deeper into those areas on what can be done and can't be done. And then sustainability includes these other topics like energy efficiency and neighbors and community. And so there's definitely this interrelationship. There's plenty of people who are both, of course, practicing organic, biodynamic, and sustainable all simultaneously, and people who are even certified to multiple of these approaches. So to dig a little bit deeper into some of these sustainable practices, I think some of the really key ones are, it's about natural resource conservation. So conserving water and energy, using it as efficiently as possible, maintaining healthy soils in a number of ways, protecting air and water quality, enhancing relationships with employees and communities. Of course, the wildlife and the broader ecosystem is a key aspect of sustainability. And as I mentioned, improving the economic viability is also a key element. So to dig a little deeper into, I think some of the topics that are not always top of mind are, one is energy efficiency. So within the winery itself, doing energy audits is a really great way to look at where are you using your energy, where can you make improvements, insulating tanks and glycol lines, covering outdoor tanks if you have any, night air cooling, lighting. Of course, everyone thinks of alternative energy, which is fantastic, but really the key is to make sure that you're operating as an energy efficient winery as possible before you actually make the move into doing any kind of alternative energy, just because energy efficiency is much cheaper than renewable energy. On the human resources side, it includes a lot of different practices and topics, but I think one of the key ones is really maintaining healthy work environments. And so that's through employee training, your employee benefits, and having wellness programs. These are all really key elements of sustainability. Engaged employees is another one. So having green teams of people who are really focused on sustainability across your operation, having incentives and recognition for sustainability achievements, really just having a conversation within your operation so that everyone feels included. Everyone can share ideas of where they can see efficiency opportunities and really be heard on their ideas, because there's always so much out there on where things can be improved. And I think sustainability, when you are really looking at it as an operation, provides an opportunity to have a platform for that. As I mentioned, neighbors and community, this includes things like, do your neighbors even have your contact information? Do you have a way of really receiving and understanding any potential neighbor community concerns? Do you have a way to address those? Can you communicate through tours and meetings? And another really key part is contributions to your community. So we know that the wine industry is really involved in their local communities through volunteering and donations and so many things. And so recognizing that that's also a part of sustainability in the broader sense of being in a sustainable community. Environmentally preferred purchasing, I think, is one that is not always top of mind for people, although I think it's definitely becoming a little more top of mind for some people. But it really is about looking at all of your purchasing and where are there ways that you can incorporate environmental attributes, social attributes into your purchasing decisions. So it includes having, a policy that guides some of your purchasing, really having conversations with your providers. And that's a really fantastic way to, influence the supply chain. And, the more that people are asking their suppliers for, the environmental attributes of their products, or what do they do in their operation to be sustainable, we're helping to drive change, not just within the industry, but beyond as well. So what are some of the benefits of all of these sustainable practices? They're very broad and wide. And I think, I've talked with hundreds and hundreds of growers and vintners over the years. And I feel like you can ask anyone this question and you'll get a different answer from every person. But I think, some of the key ones that we hear a lot is really reducing unnecessary inputs and outputs. And really, again, I think it's taking a step back and looking at your operation to see some of these things, which directly also relates to reducing costs and enhancing your economic viability. It does also help with your minimizing your risk and liability exposure. And this definitely happens a lot in California, as I mentioned, with so many environmental regulations. It being proactive is another really important reason I think that people adopt sustainable practices, and under environmental pressures, even social pressures, and just recognizing that there's a role for us all to play in that. And also just joining a network of wine community members, I think, is something that we hear a lot of people realizing that it's great to hear what others are doing in this area, and it's really, inspires them to try out new practices in their own operation. So the benefits specifically of doing a self-assessment of your operation and really documenting your practices are similar, but I think, again, it really helps identify operational efficiencies. One key one that I feel like I hear a lot is to be able to ask better questions about your operation, and also to learn about new practices. And again, this is where, because sustainability is so comprehensive, and when you sit down to do a self-assessment of, 15 different chapters, it really kind of broadens your thinking about your overall operation. Because as we know, you get really focused on your pest management at a certain times of the year and really focused on different elements. So when you step back and really use it as a time to plan for your operation, you learn new things about your operation. A really key one about, I think, doing a self-assessment is it helps you define your sustainable practices, which is something, again, that because sustainability is unique from vineyard to vineyard, from winery to winery, understanding what it means for you and being able to articulate what are your practices that you're using at your operation that are sustainable is really beneficial, especially when we get to responding to increasing market demands. And so as more and more people care about sustainability, as more and more visitors to your tasting room ask about sustainability, as more people just care in general, it's important that you have a way to be able to address that interest. And then as far as for California, it also helps people learn about what's required for our certification. Getting to certification, I know, you don't have a certification in Arizona, but just want to mention, because it really is, I think, something that a lot of different regions throughout the United States and actually the world have, wine regions, have started with educational sustainability programs, but then have learned to evolve into these certification programs, mostly because of the marketplace demand and the need for that additional credibility. So we've asked our certified participants, what are the top 3 reasons, or what are your main motivations for seeking certification? And always the number one is to be able to more credibly communicate and have that third-party verification aspect really backing up any of their claims. But also another key one is getting credit for their efforts. And so I think one thing that's really nice about when people go through the self-assessment the first time is that they recognize that they're already doing so many sustainability practices within their operation. Of course, there's always room for improvement and ways to grow, but it really, I think, allows people to understand, like, oh, we're doing this, we're doing a lot of this already, and it allows them to get credit for that. And then, of course, it also drives continuous improvement. So because within our certification program, we actually have a requirement for continuous improvement. So as I mentioned, we require that people do action plans, they make improvements. Those are actually verified by their third-party auditor. Because of that, we are actually driving this improvement throughout the industry. So especially for some of our vineyards and wineries who've been certified for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, they've really been able to push the envelope with their sustainability, and it's really a fantastic thing to see. Some of the other benefits, as I've already mentioned, is cost savings. There's a lot of value to your brand, again, as people ask and care more about sustainability, and then risk reduction through that continuous improvement. There's also regional benefits to sustainability, especially within California, but other wine regions as well. Sustainability is a really big part of the story. So within California, not only within Wine Institute, our partner organization, sustainability is one of our core pillars of communication that we talk about. And so it's really key to so much of our messaging, not only within California, but nationally and internationally. It's just a really big part of our California wine story. But there's many regions, both within California and in Oregon and Washington, New York, and others where sustainability is just a really big part, again, of their regional story. And so the more, growers and vintners practicing sustainability, the more that can actually be part of that story. So to talk a little bit about some of the drivers and trends, and again, who cares about all this beyond us as the industry itself? And so, as I mentioned, there is this global commitment to sustainable wine growing. California was not unique in developing our sustainability programs. At the same time, you had programs, educational programs with self-assessments being developed in New Zealand, in South Africa, in Australia. Since then, there's many other programs. Chile has a program now, Argentina is developing one, Italy. It's really interesting to see that within the wine industry worldwide, sustainability has been a really key focus for 20 plus years. And so it's just something that is happening within our industry. And again, like I mentioned, in other parts of the country as well. But we did some trade research. We actually did it first in 2016 and then again in 2019 to really try to find out, how much of the wine trade cares about sustainability. So I'm talking about distributors, retailers, restaurateurs, retail shops, and we had about 450 or so respondents, and it was run through a full glass research and wine opinions panel. But we asked them, what's the importance of sustainable practices in choosing your wines? And you can see from those, 400 or so trade, frequently was answered 32% of the time, more recently, 21% of the time in 2016. Occasionally, they're looking at sustainable practices when choosing their wine for their customers. And that's, about 50%. And so when, again, looking at this, 82% in 2019 of these wine trade said that sustainable practices are either frequently or occasionally a factor when choosing a wine to market or sell to their customers. So pretty big chunk. The other interesting thing to see on this when comparing 2016 to 2019 is that the rarely went down from 24% to only 14%. So again, more wine trade, who are the ones putting wine out in front of consumers, are caring about sustainability. A little bit more on that same research, we asked, do you feel the demand for sustainably produced products has increased over the past 5 to 10 years? 73% said yes. Do you think it's going to continue to increase in demand? And 76% said yes, they definitely see sustainable products being more desirable to consumers. And then I think really the key one that I always come back to in this trade research is this number down here, that 71% of this wine trade said they would purchase a sustainably produced wine over one that is not. And so I feel this is something you hear a lot where, all things being equal, wine quality, great price, or wine price, someone in the trade will reach for the one that is sustainably produced over one that is not. And that's critical, right? I mean, that's when we're competing in a very full market. It's a really key piece to be able to have that. And we see something similar in consumer research as well. So consumer interest in sustainability. We worked with Wine Intelligence to do a survey in also 2019 and again in 2020 of about 2,000 US wine consumers. And some of the key insights that we found on that research is that 74% of US wine drinkers indicated they would consider buying sustainably produced wine in the future. So, 3/4 of people said they would look for sustainably produced wine. Another key element is that, 9 out of 10 millennials said that they are willing to pay more for sustainable wine, about $3 or so more, although that's always hard to measure, but that they would pay more at all is the key message there, I think. And then tied very closely to that message is that younger consumers are significantly more engaged with sustainability in general, viewed as increasingly important to protect the future. So we see that not only in millennials, but Gen Z of legal drinking age, and just find that, these younger consumers really are focused on sustainability, want to know how their products are made. And so that's where sustainability really comes into play, sustainable wine. And then also sustainability certifications for wine. we're seen as providing transparency and reassurance from these consumers. And then also, these consumers were saying that they seek easy to navigate indicators to find and identify sustainable wine. So when they see separate sections in stores, they get excited because it's easier to really focus on what they're looking for. Simple, clear, and consistent labeling has been helpful. Tasting opportunities where they can actually taste sustainably produced wine. And then again, these younger consumers are supportive of online media. So, talking about sustainability and different, online social media, et cetera, is something that they like to see as well. So communicating sustainability, I feel like this is something that's been really interesting to see over the years, because especially in the beginning with the California wine industry, people were very hesitant to talk about their sustainable practices. I think there has been a sentiment in the past of greenwashing and just everyone being so careful not to be accused of greenwashing, which is, making claims that you can't support. But I feel like because so many people are really committed to sustainability, that communicating it is really the key to making even more of an impact with all of these practices. And so there's a lot of communication opportunities, for the individual winery or vineyard. Talking about your sustainability is a really positive part, could be a very positive part of your PR, a part of the story that you share with trade and consumers, especially that segment that we know care and actually want to hear these stories and about the practices and about, what you're doing in the vineyard to, create healthy soils and make climate resilient vineyards and all of those great things. And of course, as I mentioned, there is this added credibility with certification, but I definitely think that if you're practicing sustainability, by all means, you should be talking about it on your website if you have one, with any tours, with any visitors. Really talking about the practices you're doing is going to benefit not only yourself, but really the whole industry. Also, there's, as I mentioned, the statewide regional opportunities to communicate, being part of this regional story. And then trade and media partners who always want to hear more about sustainable practices that are taking place. And really, I think a key element for so many of us is really trying to help educate these same trade and consumers. I didn't mention within the trade research that we also asked, how much do these wine trade know about sustainability? And it was a pretty good amount, but it's something that there's still plenty of people who feel confused by it. As I mentioned, I think because sustainability is so comprehensive and so complex, it makes it very difficult to talk about. And so the more that wine growers and vintners all over are talking about sustainability, we're helping to educate our trade and consumers and really, again, benefiting everyone. I wanted to mention that we have been involved in this multi-state project that we have been leading with our kind of peer organizations within Oregon, New York, and Washington. And it's called United for a Sustainable Future. But it was really has been our way for the past 2.5 years of really working together and coming up with a shared definition of sustainable wine growing, shared principles. What does sustainable wine growing look like in Oregon and versus California? But recognizing that we're all focused on the same core principles of what sustainable wine growing means, the same core topic areas. And so, we came up with this definition that we all really feel strongly about, captures what we're all doing in our unique regions. But that sustainable wine growing and winemaking is a holistic approach that conserves natural resources, protects the environment, enhances wine quality, enriches the lives of employees and communities, and safeguards family farms and businesses today and for future generations to come. And through this project, you can see some of the partners that we have, partner organizations. We've held some sustainable wine growing summits. This project also funded that trade and consumer research that I just talked about. But we also have just recently launched a website, sustainablewinegrowing.us, that you could take a look at. And it actually includes information about all these programs and includes our shared definition and really our attempts at trying to have a single place for people to go to learn about all these different initiatives happening within the US industry. I'll also mention we just held our sustainability summit earlier this week, And if you're interested in seeing any of that, we had some really great talks about, more about communicating sustainability, about climate resiliency within vineyards and wineries. And we're going to be making all of those recordings available. So if you're interested in taking a look, please, you can find it on the Sustainable Winegrowing US site. Another point I just wanted to make about communicating sustainability is really ensuring that staff are knowledgeable about your practices. I think something that happens a lot is that there's key people within an organization who are really focused on sustainable practice implementation, but maybe the people in the tasting room aren't as familiar with the practices. And so just really making sure that anyone who is communicating with wine buyers, with consumers, are really knowledgeable about the practices. Making your sustainability story easy to find is one that's really important. Again, if you have a website, putting it on your website, and making it easy to find on your website. Sharing your story with wine trade. Again, wine trade seems like they're always interested to learn more. Communicate with your consumers, communicate with your industry peers. Really, the more that we all talk about different sustainable practices, the more that you are inspiring others, learning from others. I don't think I mentioned that I think another key reason why the California program has been so successful is that it really is all about peer-to-peer education. So, our workbook is all about what has worked in different California vineyards and wineries. And we do host, hundreds and hundreds of educational workshops. And we always have people come talk about what they've done in their vineyard or winery and maybe what didn't work in their vineyard or winery. And just really that peer education has been so critical to really getting so many people to understand what sustainability means for them. And finally, I just wanted to mention just a couple of our tools and resources. We have this new resource library. It's a searchable online resource library. Everything that we do, we make publicly available. I didn't even get into the many, many different grant projects that we have engaged in over the years, but they're all focused on, really delving deep into specific sustainability topics and creating tools and resources and educational opportunities around those. But this resource library is a really great place to find a lot of that information. We have done a lot of educational videos that you can see on different topics like energy efficiency and water efficiency and everything else. Case studies, we have fact sheets, we have a lot of templates. A lot of those have actually been created in response to our certification program, which we require people to have an IPM plan. So we have a template for that, and many other things. And we also have some, not as many as I would like, but some Spanish language resources as well in that resource library. Again, you can find that from our website. And then just to provide a little bit more examples of some of those resources, one of the reasons we developed that library is because after doing this for 20 years, we have a lot of tools and resources. So it's kind of hard to find stuff. So we really wanted to make it, if you're really wanting to focus on the efficiency of your irrigation system, you can go to water efficiency and find all our resources that way. So that's why we created that tool. But we have some really great resources specifically on irrigation uniformity and how to actually do it yourself. A lot of these tools, as you see, are very like do it yourself. We have DIY in a lot of our titles, but because really we're trying to just provide the tools that a grower vintner can sit down, when they find the time to really dig into some of these different topics and really take a look at their operation themselves. So, how to conduct an irrigation uniformity test, which is so critical both to water efficiency and also wine grape quality, how to conduct your own do-it-yourself vineyard or winery energy audit. We focused a lot around winery water management over the years. We have a really great small wineries handbook that takes you through different steps on how to self-assess specifically your water use within your winery, but also your process water and what are the inputs you're putting in for your cleaning and sanitation and all of that, which is a really fantastic resource if you want to look at your winery water use. We have a weed scouting template, solid waste audit tool, how to look at your solid waste stream, many, many, many other things. I just wanted to pull out a couple to provide some examples. And then of course, our Code of Sustainable Winegrowing, our self-assessment workbook, is a fantastic resource. I don't think I even mentioned that we have tons of educational resources throughout that workbook and just educational content. So it's, over half of the workbook is actually educational content, not just the self-assessment itself. And so that's also one that I definitely encourage you to look at if you're interested in delving into this topic more. And so that's it. Sorry, Lisa, I was not doing a good job with time check. Hope that's okay.
This was so great, Lisa. Thank you. And I did not, I mean, there's so many questions, which is fabulous, that have come in while you've been speaking. And I'm hoping that we can tackle a few of them. And for the ones that we may not get to, we will follow up with you and get those questions, if that's okay. And then,
of course.
Maybe even do a second session with you another time.
Yeah, so I would love that.
We can convince you to do that. So thank you. So I will just dive right in. One of the first questions was Arizona wines or wineries rarely produce with sustainable, organic, or biodynamic grapes. Why do you think, from your position and your experiences, Arizona grape growers have been reluctant to shift to more sustainable practices?
I honestly, like, the first thing that comes to mind is just thinking about, again, what are the practices being used? And it just makes me wonder, are there sustainable practices that actually are being used that people don't recognize as sustainable practices? Because I think a lot of this, especially when you're looking at, water efficiency, is so directly tied to wine grape quality, that I think that people probably are using some of these practices, maybe without actually labeling them as sustainable practices. I think there's other ones probably that this person that asked the question might be thinking of, like cover crops and, compost and stuff like that, that are a little more obvious if they're not being used. Yeah. And I'm sorry, what was the actual question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I think essentially, we're a small industry, a new industry, a newer industry. So the question was kind of specific to why,
why are they not? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Why have we not,
I think, sorry, that's what it was. I mean, I think it probably has a lot to do with just exposure to these practices. And that's why I think, Lisa, we have talked before about trying to bring the self-assessment tool to your region and share it. And, for everyone to know that it's a publicly available tool. You could take it, you can modify it for the Arizona industry at your will. And I think a lot of it is really just educational. So I think as soon as people start seeing these practices, and again, also seeing that their peers are using them successfully is such a key piece of it. So, if some people started to do the self-assessment and look at these practices and try them out and tell their neighbors, I think you would start to see a lot more adoption.
I'm so sorry. My screen just went blank here. So this kind of leads, and we just have a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap up, Lisa. But would the Sustainability Alliance create a branch in Arizona, that's similar to what you're doing?
It's a great question. We've also been asked a lot, like, would we have a US wide program? Because our partner organizations are so California based, Wine Institute and the California Association of Winegrowers. Anytime we've talked about this, it's been a really fast no.
Right.
But that said, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we did this multi-state project that I talked about. And really, we do have the goal to bring our tools and resources to whoever wants them, wherever they're located. And so that's where I say, like, please, like, take the self-assessment, modify it for your region, use these tools and resources that we've developed over the years for your own area. So just because I think definitely for the near term, the answer from our California-based partners are focused on California, So.
Right. Well, and that's where, again, as we've discussed over the years, actually, having just the discussion started, which is what, today was about. Hopefully good things will unfold from here. And you've been gracious enough to share a lot of great information with us today. And for those that did, in the chat function, have a lot of questions, we will follow up and answer those questions. But we do need to say goodbye. And thank you, Lisa, so much. We're grateful for your time and for this great overview on what you've been doing for a chunk of time. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.